You told a client a number. Maybe it was the price of a service. Maybe a quote for something bigger. Maybe it was the new number, the one that went up this year. And they said yes. They didn't ask how you got to it. They didn't ask what it cost you to deliver or what you needed it to cover. They trusted it was fair because it came from you. They handed you their card or booked their next visit and moved on. That kind of trust is easy to miss. It happens quietly in almost every appointment with almost every client. But sit with this. Sometimes the number they said yes to was too low for everything you gave them. And sometimes, this is the harder one, and we're going to be honest about it today, it was more than what they walked out with. Either way, the number in the experience didn't match. That's what today's episode is about. What your work is actually worth, and whether your number reflects it. Welcome to Beauty Pro Universe. A quick word if you're new here. The show is one continuous conversation. Each episode builds on the one before it. This is the third. You'll get more out of it if you start at the beginning, but you can follow from here. Early on, we named 4 kinds of trust a client hands you the moment they sit down: physical, emotional, psychological, relational. 4 kinds of access granted before a word is spoken. Today, we add a 5th, and this one doesn't feel like trust at all. It feels like a transaction. It's financial trust. The trust a client places in your number. And here's what this episode is about. That number is supposed to reflect what your work is worth, the whole of it. And here's the thing this industry almost never says out loud. The number and the value have to match. When they match, the client feels it and they stay. When they don't, in either direction, the client feels that too. This industry misses in both directions. We're going to look at both plainly and without blame because neither one starts as anyone's fault. So few of us were ever taught this. So one thing we're not doing today is math. The number itself has its own episode, so today is about what that number is supposed to hold. So when you sit down to build it, you know exactly what you're pricing. Start with what actually happens when a client accepts a price. In most industries, the buyer tests the cost. They compare. They negotiate. They'll ask what's included. The price is a claim to be checked. That's not how it works here. A client who trusts you doesn't test your number. They take it as information from someone they believe. You say it and it becomes real to them because you said it. The relationship already did the checking. That's financial trust. And it's remarkable when you look straight at it. Someone's handing over money, often a lot, often for years, just on the belief that your number is fair. They're not checking your math. They're trusting that you did. Now hold that up against how prices actually get set in this industry. And I want to be fair here because there's a real pricing conversation out there and some of it's good. At the start, let's be honest, most of us guess. We look around at what the person in the next station charges or at the place down the street or at what we paid before we were on this side of it. Here's the quiet part. The neighbor you're copying probably guessed too. So a whole industry ends up anchored in a number that no one ever really built. Some go further, and good for them. They find a real method. Add up the cost, factor in the hours, add what you need to earn. That's a genuine step up from a guess, and some go further still into pricing for the value they bring, not just the cost they carry. And that's the right direction. But notice what all of it has in common. Guessing, calculating, valuing yourself. It's all built from your side of the table. your costs, your hours, your worth. The half we rarely teach is the other one. Not do you value your work, but does the experience the client receives actually live up to the number you named? That's the piece this industry talks about the least. Not the number itself, whether what's underneath it in the room on that day is really there. That's not a knock on anyone. So few of us were ever taught to look at it. The education gap we named last time shows up nowhere more sharply than right here. So the trust the client extends and what's actually standing under that number, they don't always match. Closing that gap starts with one question. What is the number even supposed to represent? So what are you actually pricing? If you heard the trust conversation, you already have most of that answer. So I'm going to point back to it and not walk through it all again. When a client pays, the line item might say service, a cut, a color, a facial, a set, a treatment. That's what gets named, and that's where most pricing talk stops. What's the going rate for any service? But the service is the smallest part of what you deliver. Under it sits your skill built over years. And on top of that sits everything we spent a whole episode naming. The 4 kinds of trust a client hands you the moment they sit down. None of that is on the menu. All of it is what the client is really paying for when it's actually being delivered. And that last part is the whole episode. The value isn't automatic. The price tag doesn't create it. The skill has to be there. The care has to be there. The room, the attention, the whole feeling of being the one receiving the work, those have to be there too. So the price makes a promise. The appointment is where the promise is kept, or it isn't. And the client can feel the difference. So, what happens when the number and the value come apart? It happens in 2 ways, and this industry does both. Here's the first way. The price falls short of the value. This is the familiar one. The number is too low to sustain the business under it. So you make up the difference somewhere, usually with volume, more clients, longer days, less recovery, or with quiet erosion. You're skipping the training, putting off the new equipment, working through the strain. A low price doesn't actually save the client anything. Over time, it wears down the very thing they came for. A depleted professional who can't show up to all that trust the way the client is counting on. And there's a subtler cost, the sitting right on top of the financial trust. When you underprice to keep a relationship comfortable, you're quietly subsidizing it. You are absorbing a cost to hold up something the client values, and they don't even know it's happening. Their trust is real, but part of what's holding it up is you, carrying a number that you can't sustain. Neither of you would choose that if you could see the whole picture. So pricing your work correctly isn't a betrayal of the trust. It's what keeps the trust honest. Now here's the second way. The price runs past the value. I'm going to say the same thing I said about the first one. This isn't anyone's fault to begin with either. It's not about naming anyone, and it's not about who's good and who isn't. It's the same dynamic facing the other way. A price set too high, sometimes very high, for work delivered without the attention, the room, the care a number like that quietly promises. The client pays a premium and gets the technical result, but not much of what the price implies. The room is half present. The appointment's somehow about the professional instead of the client. The financial trust was extended, it just wasn't honored. That's not a different failure from underpricing, it's the same one pointed in the other way. The number and the experience didn't travel together. And it cost the professional too, just later and more quietly. Underprice and you feel it right away in a body and a bank account that never catch up. But overprice and you feel it down the line when the client who paid too much for too little just stops booking. Often they couldn't tell you why. Both are carrying a cost they never chose. Neither was shown the thing that would fix it. So now one thing I want to be clear about, this is not the industry losing its way, because it isn't. Right now, today, in every discipline, at every price point, there are professionals delivering an experience that fully earns the number on it. The attention paid, the room, the care, all of it. That's not rare, and it's not a memory. It's living proof of what a price can stand for when the value is really there. So the gap we're naming isn't decline, it's variance. Some are closing it beautifully. Some were never shown it was there to close. This is about joining the ones who are already there. Which is also why looking at the market isn't a mistake. Copying a number is a mistake. There's a way to watch the market that isn't lazy at all, where you look honestly at what you charge and what you actually deliver for it, and where both sit in the market that you serve. Not to match someone's price, to locate yourself. You can't know whether a number in your value line up if you've never looked clearly at the water you're swimming in. Before we go further, let's gently separate two things, because keeping them apart is where a lot of clarity lives. There's what you need, and there's what your work is worth. They're not the same number, and neither one sets the other. What you need is real. What your life costs is what it costs. But a fact about your bills is not a measure of your value. Someone living simply might be a beginner or a master. Someone with higher expenses might be either one too. How much your life costs and how good your work is have nothing to say to each other. A modest life doesn't mean you're undercharging, and a fuller one doesn't mean you've earned more. The need is real either way. It just isn't what sets the price, because the client isn't paying for your rent or your build out or even your years in. They're paying for what reaches them when they're in front of you. So if need doesn't measure worth, and your lifestyle doesn't either, what does? Lately, a lot of this industry has landed on one answer: an audience, followers, reach. The idea whoever's most visible must be worth the most. There's real energy there, and a following isn't nothing. And it can bring someone to your door who'd never have found you otherwise. But reach isn't the measure. A following is interest from people who've never sat with you. The feed can open the door, but only the work keeps them. The measure is the person actually in front of you, in your chair, on your table, under your hands. The one who booked, the one who's paying, who's trusting your number in real time, the one who's receiving the full value we've been naming or not. That person tells you what your work is worth, not the feed. And here's the part that shows up in your books. When the experience matches the price promised, the skill, the care, the room, the attention, clients feel it and they come back. When it falls short of what the number implied, some come once and don't return. People leave for all kinds of reasons. Some drift or forget to rebook. And a good follow-up wins plenty of them back. But when the gap between what they paid and what they got is real, they feel it, even if they never said it out loud. And that's the one no reminder will fix. And this isn't a salon truth or a med spa truth. It holds in every discipline. Because a client deciding whether it was worth it is the most universal thing that happens in our work. The number and the experience have to travel together, and the client is the one who decides whether they did. That's true no matter whose room it is. Your own space, one you rent, one you're paid to stand in or sit in. The person in front of you is the point. Now, some of you have been listening to all of this knowing that you don't set your own price. Someone else does. You're on commission. Your rate and your take-home ride on a structure you didn't build, so you might figure this whole conversation belongs to someone else. It doesn't. If anything, it belongs to you more, because the value doesn't change based on who holds the pen. You still deliver every part of what we've named. The skill, the care, the trust. You're still the one who decides whether the experience matches the number on the menu, whoever wrote it. The client extends that financial trust to you, the person in front of them. What your work is worth and whether the work honors it is yours either way. I'm not going to tell you what to do with that. Maybe it means building a fuller book. Maybe a conversation down the line. Maybe someday rethinking how you structure your work entirely. We get into the levers and the models in the episodes ahead, but for today, the move is the same as it is for everyone. Know what your work is worth and make sure the work is worthy of it. You can't weigh a structure or your place in it against a number you've never examined. So here's the assignment, and this one's real. It'll cost you an afternoon and a little money, and it's worth both. Think of it as continuing education, because that's what it is. If you've got a good tax person, it might be worth asking them what applies to your situation. Last episode, you named a gap you most needed to close. If it was pricing, here's the second question to set beside it. Does what you deliver actually match your number? And you can't answer that honestly from your own side of the work. You've been the professional too long, even if you're new. So go get on the other side. Most of us get our services done where we already work. A friend nearby, a trade, a quick favor between clients. Half price or sometimes free. Everyone talking shop the whole time. That's not being a client. That's being a professional getting a favor. It's been years, maybe it's never happened since you walked in somewhere, a total stranger, and just received. So do that. Go somewhere no one knows you. Book something real and pay full price. No discount. No relationship softening the edges. And make it a service you don't perform yourself. Because when it's not your own work, you can't slip into grading the technique, because you know you would. You're left to just feel it the way a client feels it. So don't audit it, just feel it. And let 3 things tell you the story. The first one is the restroom. Go check it and be honest about what it tells you. The restroom never lies. A cared for one says someone thought about the whole experience. A neglected one says the care runs out somewhere the client can feel, even if they can't name it. The second is whether you were truly attended to, or were you just processed? Was the person present with you, or somewhere else, quietly making the appointment about themselves instead of you? And the third is the only question that finally matters. At the end, did the price match what you just felt? Then bring that answer home to your own work. Because now you know, not as a professional grading yourself, but as a client who just paid exactly what it feels like when the number and the experience travel together. When the price and the care and the room and the attention are all one piece, and you walk out feeling it was worth every dollar. And exactly what it feels like when they're not. That's alignment. Not charging more, not charging less. Making sure that whatever you charge, the value is unmistakably there to meet it. And the fastest way to remember what that feels like is to go be the one paying for it. And if you truly can't get out, no time, no money to spare, then reach back to the last time you were a stranger paying full price somewhere, anywhere, even in a restaurant, and put that same question to that memory. The outing is better, but the errand was never the point. The point is remembering in your own body what a matched price feels like and what a missed one feels like, so you can go looking for it in your own work. 5 dimensions of trust now, not 4. Physical, emotional, psychological, relational, and financial. The trust a client places in a number they've never checked because it came from you. Today was about what that number is supposed to hold and the honest work of making sure it holds. In both directions. Not too low to sustain you, not higher than the experience you actually deliver. Matched, because the client always feels the match or the miss long before they can explain it. Next time we build the number itself, and we use it to explain why a full schedule can still leave you with nothing, and why this industry loses so many good people who deserve to stay. If you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. And please share this with someone in the industry who's been carrying a price they've never had a chance to examine, in whichever direction it needs examining. This is Beauty Pro Universe. The conversation continues.